before I do, I should say for myself, I've been in the field of public transportation since 1983, almost 30 years. And I've always found that when I ask people, how did you get into the field? Generally speaking, they'll say, well, it was an accident. It was not my intention, but I found out about it. I bumped into this opportunity and pursued it and had no idea that these sort of opportunities were here. And we need to do something about that as an industry. We need to increase our profile. We need to get better information out there to the public and to the future workforce, letting them know that there are a lot of opportunities in public transportation, and that's what Nicole is going to talk about today. Nicole Corey is a research project coordinator at the John J. Heldrich Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers University. Currently, Nicole is working on gathering feedback on an occupation guide for all occupations in public transit. In the final phases of the project, Nicole will be managing the editing process for the occupational content and will be developing a dissemination plan for the guide once it is complete. Nicole co-authored The Labor Market Then and Now, Changing Realities in the 21st Century with Dr. Carl Van Horn, and also The New Unemployables, Older Job Seekers Struggle to Find Work During the Great Recession with Maria Heidkamp and Dr. Carl Van Horn. And in addition, she wrote Older Workers, the Great Recession, and the Impact of Long-Term Unemployment, again with Dr. Carl Van Horn and Maria Heidkamp. Nicole earned her Master's of Public Policy from the Blaustein School for Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers University with a concentration in community development. Prior to pursuing her master's, Nicole gained experience in the private sector as an assistant and research manager at a private equity firm. Nicole is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate from Rutgers University, where she earned a BA in comparative literature with high honors. And it's my pleasure to introduce Nicole. Nicole, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. And I'll just wait. Okay, so I just want to start off by thanking everyone for tuning in this afternoon. This research project is a very big project for me to take on, as I'm fairly new into the public transportation world, and I'm learning a lot, and I've really appreciated the feedback that I've received so far from people in the transit community, so I hope our discussion today can help move the work forward, get some new people engaged, and get some feedback from some new perspectives. And it's encouraging that we don't have a heavy representation from the Northeast, because I've pretty much gotten a lot of feedback from people here locally. So I look forward to feedback from people in Florida and the Southwest and others I saw tune in. So I'm excited for that. So I'll just get started. So the Heldrich Center for Workforce Development at Rutgers University was founded in 1997, and we're a leading university-based research center focused on workforce development issues. We have expertise on a number of key industries in this state and within the nation, and we identify the changing skill needs of employers and also work on regional workforce solutions. And we try to take the public policy side of things and our knowledge of the public policy landscape and kind of help the private sector navigate that as well through a lot of our efforts. We've done over 300 interviews with employers in multiple industries, dozens of focus groups and surveys.
Now, Nicole, speaking of feedback, we were getting just a little bit of feedback. You're not on speakerphone right now.
I am not. I'm on.
Okay. All right. Go right ahead
then. So I'll talk about the project that we are discussing right now. We are under a grant from the Federal Transit Administration that asked the Heldrich Center to create a poster and a brochure, kind of a poster brochure that is going to map the public transportation jobs in the sector. So we kind of have a fold-out brochure that we think could be available at career day events or at other recruiting events that would kind of contain some basic information on the industry, and then when you fold it out, it would become a poster that would talk about different job families in the industry and things like that, and just give a little bit of overview on the skill needs for those jobs and kind of common skills across those job families, as well as give some indication of career ladders and different areas for progression as one goes throughout their career in transit. To accompany that, we have a far more detailed occupational guidebook that we've drafted that contains 176 occupations that we've identified in the transit industry. Each occupation has a page in the guidebook which highlights skill needs, educational requirements, salary information, and alternate job titles for that occupation. Additionally, there is some talk of doing an electronic database of occupational information. However, we haven't really moved very far with that. So at this point, we're really focusing on these written materials that we've drafted. In order to gather the information for this first draft, which I'm kind of presenting to you today, we looked at a lot of information online. There's a wealth of information online about transit, and we kind of collaborated and triangulated what was available there. We did analysis of the National Transit Database. We used a lot of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then we kind of coupled those preliminary efforts with input from experts that we identified in the transit and public transportation industry through our advisory group, which comprises Joel as well as a number of other prominent experts in the field of public transportation. As mentioned before, the occupational guidebook is fairly detailed and long. We have the job title, the title of the job group within which this job lies, and the functional area within transit. We then talk about the level of work, whether it's a frontline worker, more middle management, or a senior level position, the basic job description, the priority knowledge skills, the education required, alternate titles, and the approximate salary range. The guide also includes sample organizational charts for large and small agencies, and also descriptions of the work environment and conditions that correspond with each job family and functional area. This is a screenshot of the cover of the guidebook as it stands now, and as I said before, we've released draft materials which are out in public for now, which we're in the process of revising. This is a screenshot of how the guide is organized. You'll see again that we have functional areas, 4 main functional areas, 20 job groups, and then the 176 occupations. And then within each of those, we talk about the different level of worker within each of these occupations. Here's a sample page for an occupation. We have here the bus operator, so you'll see at the top this lies within our vehicle operations group, and then we give a brief paragraph as to what this job entails. You'll see we have this knowledge, skills, and abilities, and some bullet points there as to the main skills this job requires. We have education and certifications below that, which hopefully we really want to get feedback on these areas that were accurate in education and certifications, especially given the workforce development component of this work. Any alternate job titles which the position might have. And then we have compensation. I'll talk 1 minute about this compensation piece because this is really where we're having some very substantive discussions with experts in the field on how to accurately present this material, given that compensation is highly varied in many of these occupations in the industry, as well as the fact that we know that some, it depends on ownership of the agency, the size of the agency, as well as location within the country of the agency. For the draft materials we have now in the field, we've removed the compensation information while we work with a working group to kind of figure out how to best display this information and be relevant nationwide, but also give some accuracy to the data. So I'll talk more about that a little bit later. As mentioned as well, we are transforming this occupational content and cutting it down to fit onto a poster or brochure. So this could be something handed out at events to job seekers and students. It'll give just kind of an overview of the industry, brief descriptions of, the job families and the different areas of work in transit. And we have this available now as well in draft form, which you can print out on 8.5 by 11 pages. So at the end of the presentation, I'll give you my contact information. This is kind of what the poster would look like in terms of the layout. Here's a screenshot. This particular content on the right, you'll see some overview content on the industry, and on the left here, you will see that this is our central services and administration information, so jobs that are more in the central services offices. And here's another screenshot. This is the vehicle operations category on the left. We also have vehicle maintenance category, facilities, track and road maintenance, and some more content on the central services and administration side on the right. As mentioned before, this will kind of fold out into a large poster that would kind of go on a wall or something like that, that counselors or students or other HR professionals and recruiters could reference and hand out. So at this point, I just wanted to pause for a minute to see if there's any questions on the content of these materials before I go into what we're trying to do now in terms of gathering feedback and planning to disseminate this material publicly. Okay. So
Nicole, we did have one question that came in.
Okay, I see that.
Okay, it says, did you consider benefits and overtime that typically go along with different occupations?
We have considered that. The problem is data collection. If we're going to be going nationwide across all these agencies, it's difficult to find a reliable data source that covers everything, with a small margin of error that's representative of all occupations in transit. So, there are some surveys. I know APTA did a survey, and TCRP has done surveys on compensation that include these benefits. However, those surveys are limited to, just a few occupations. And whereas, bus drivers, I think, and frontline workers make up a very large portion of the workforce, they don't really get into what the marketing department makes or accounting or financial analysis and things like that. So we basically had to go to the BLS data, which really just talks about annual income in terms of your wages. So for that piece, we're kind of figuring out maybe we would have to have some additional discussion in the guide and the introduction of it or something that addresses the compensation piece and says the numbers here purely reflect income, and we'd have to go back to the BLS data and make sure that that also includes overtime. As I understand it now, the BLS data, goes off of wage records, so that would include overtime. However, benefits is not captured in that data. And if there's no other questions, then I'm going to move on to this next piece.
Yeah, go right ahead. Okay,
so as I said before, these materials are now out and publicly being circulated in draft form. Again, I'll give my contact information at the end of this presentation, and I'm more than happy to share these with people if you'd like to see them. But at this point, we really would like to make sure that our content is accurate and really is useful by all agencies. For example, I know that the detail of our occupational guide is relevant for large organizations like New Jersey Transit up here, the MTA. However, I did speak with people in rural agencies last week who said that a lot of the content in the guide was not exceptionally relevant to them, and we're kind of wrestling with how to make the guide very far-reaching, but also accessible to everyone and useful. And again, with the salary concerns, we know that that's something we need to work on. So we're looking for, we're doing some, tweaking of our information at this point to kind of make sure we have everything right, the terminology correct, and so forth. So for January through March, we've really been focusing on forming working groups so that we have people reviewing the salary content. And we also have groups reviewing the occupational content in our guide. If you recall the page I showed earlier, for example, bus driver, we have people kind of going through little packets of those occupational descriptions based on their expertise in transit and giving us their feedback as to whether we described things accurately, we got the certification correct, and things like that. So we're in the process of doing that now. We're also obtaining feedback at industry events. I'll be attending the Southwest Transportation Association conference in Denver next week to get feedback and to present there. And we're also attending the National Transit Workforce Summit in Washington, D.C. in March and the APTA Bus Conference in May out in California. And while we're doing this work on the feedback and revision of our draft materials, we're also drafting a dissemination plan that will map out how we're going to roll these final materials out into the public to get the tools in the hands of the practitioners that are really going to use them. I mean, we're always looking for input as to venues to release the materials, present them, or websites or different groups through which to roll out electronic forms of our materials. So from April to fall, we're going to finalize the content and close the loop on all our feedback that we're gathering from people and put that into a final document. We're going to begin implementing the dissemination plan, I believe, over the summer. And the fall, the next APTA conference, I believe we'll do a formal launch of our materials. And then we're also going to begin work on additional tools and projects as we see fit over the course of doing our feedback and closing out these documents. We're going to look for new opportunities and things in the field to build on this work.
Jennifer, could I suggest that in addition to any questions that our listeners might have, that if they have some ideas for you in terms of the dissemination process, where to try to distribute this to, that we would invite them to put that into the Q&A box as well?
That would be great. Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Yes, and if anyone wants to discuss that in the Q&A session at the end of this presentation too, I'm more than happy to hear any ideas or any feedback you're willing to provide while you're here now.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this slide shows a detailed timeline for the work groups, which I basically went through. And at this point, we're still gathering feedback and gathering volunteers to give us feedback on these materials and sending out things for comment. So again, refining the guide and poster content, it's most important to gather in-depth feedback on our materials. Our primary focus is through our peer review working groups that we've recruited and we're continuing to recruit to get really good feedback on email, via email, and comments on our documents. And also we're hosting conference calls for each working group to discuss findings if people really want to weigh in and play a larger role in our work. That would be very helpful. Also, as I mentioned before, I'm going to a number of events, and if anyone has suggestions on events that we should attend that you think would be helpful, I'd be more than happy to consider new events to go to. This slide shows the peer review working groups that we have formed. We've got 8 of them. The first 3 deal with vehicle operations, vehicle maintenance, and facilities track and road maintenance. And there's a large number of occupations within each of those, and we really could use some help filling out those groups for anyone that has expertise in those areas. It's very helpful because, as I said before, those do make up a lot of the number of workers in the industry. Then we also have central services and administration groups, which we divided into 4 working groups. Basically, we found that while in terms of actual numbers of members of the workforce, this group is not the largest, we also have a very wide range of diverse occupations. So we have everything from management and legal finance down to graphic designers, purchasing, information technology. So if anyone has expertise in these areas and would like to pitch in and let us know if we got the descriptions of these jobs right and things like that, we're kind of focusing on whether or not we're really accurate in those descriptions and could use some feedback on those. The last working group we have is the salary review, and the folks in this group are reviewing the salary content we have for all of our occupations, and right now that's kind of where a lot of the discussion is going. Whereas the feedback on the other working groups is more in terms of terminology, certification, things like that. I'm not seeing too much there yet in terms of things that, really big red flags or major concerns. The salary review group has come back with some major concerns. The feedback conflicts with one another, and I think that's going to be kind of the most substantive and an interesting part of this research. So anyone who'd like to be involved with that, it's going to be a very interesting process. So this slide shows you that we are still looking for volunteers and suggestions, anyone who wants to help with this work in any way. We're always happy to have more feedback and more people involved to help make sure we're, doing our due diligence in the editorial process at this point. And I'm very happy that I've had the opportunity to present this work, and I appreciate your time. So thank you to CUTR for allowing me to do this presentation, and let me just put up my contact information for now, and I see that we have some questions. So I'd like to go ahead and go to some questions and some discussion of the material if we could do that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Nicole, for that very concise and clear information on the project that you're involved with. Very important for the industry. And there are a few questions that we've received, and the first one is, will these job titles be coded much like the Department of Labor job codes?
We actually, in terms of the job titles themselves, I believe we kind of looked to the industry more. The point of this work, and I think the reason the FTA funded it, was more so that we have a common language in the field based on what's actually going on in the field. BLS data lags reality in a lot of ways. I mean, for instance, you look at the work that's done on diversity or accessibility or sustainability in green jobs at this point, and BLS is grappling with how to define them and incorporate them in their taxonomy. So we kind of went more on what's going on in the field through interviews, through looking at job boards, through things that are going on real time in the industry. And for that reason, we did not rely so much on BLS. I think we'd rely more on the feedback we're getting now on our materials, and initially we relied on a lot of information within transit agencies. We did a lot of data mining on the internet, just going to transit websites, referring with our advisory board, going to experts in the field, looking at job boards and things like that. So BLS was a starting point. However, we realized that they don't always do the best job of actually capturing what's going on in the field.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have another question that, well, I had a sort of a comparable question. Most people, of course, when they think of transit, they'll think of, oh, okay, I know there's a bus driver, probably some mechanic or technician to take care of it. Maybe they'll see a supervisor out in the field, but they have no idea how many other job classifications there are. How many classifications did you come up with to this point?
In terms, well, we have the job families. There's 20 job families. Mm-hmm. So those, so basically that a lot of them are within central services because we did find that there were fewer job families in terms of, within the vehicle operations, the vehicle maintenance, and the facilities maintenance. However, when you get to central services, you have all the IT, you have the planners, you have architects, and things like that. So we did the job families. The job families show that there's a wide range of diversity for people of all skills in transportation. And in a similar project actually here at the center that deals with the transportation industry, I was talking about this work to an undergraduate student at Rutgers, and she was really surprised and interested in transit because I was talking to her. I showed her the job families and the categories, and she's a communications major, and she was really interested in the fact that there's, marketing jobs in transit and things like that. And I think one of the things that this will be helpful in showing students that there are a wide range of opportunities, especially for anyone interested in, the logistics and the planning aspect of public transit jobs. There's a very wide range of content in our guide, and we did kind of do those classifications. We strayed from BLS or any other sources on those classifications and kind of looked intuitively at what makes sense, in terms of what skills these jobs encompass and where they fall and what they do. So.
Right. If I remember right, I think there were probably over 100 job classifications that you found within those families. So there really are a lot of opportunities for people from a variety of different backgrounds. And
right.
One of the questions that came in was job seekers may wish to know how many jobs there are in the public transportation industry.
Right. So that I think is something that, that might be an area of future work. I know here in New Jersey when we try to track how many jobs are open, sometimes it depends on your data source, and that depends on gathering real-time labor market information and things like that. We would be happy to work with agencies and things like that in terms of tracking labor market data, and I think that's going to be an area of future work, especially now with the internet. It's really difficult to track job openings even within a region. In New Jersey now we've been focusing on tracking real-time jobs data in certain industries. However, when you have various areas of the internet that are posting jobs, and then you also have, in the cases of unions, sometimes you have jobs that are not posted that are advertised through newsletters or through word of mouth or things like that. It's difficult to get a count, but there are projections, especially given the aging out of many employees in the transit industry in the coming years. There are some projections and there are some numbers out there that we are kind of keeping an eye on. For this project, we're really focusing on just establishing that common language to talk about the work itself. And when you identify a gap in the labor market or a need to fill the pipeline in an area, these tools will help you do that. But I think, the labor market information piece is definitely a component that we could look at for future work and kind of start thinking about that as we're out in the field now gathering feedback.
Right. Some of the numbers I've seen in other presentations make an estimate of about 400,000 people who currently work in public transportation in one way or another. But I can't confirm that, but I've seen that in a number of different places.
Right, and the thing is I know BLS, for instance, will do projections in certain industries and things like that. The problem is that, the only way to really do projections is to kind of take trends in the past and forecast them out to the future. In the economy as it is today, it's difficult to say, especially now with funding and things like that. Transit funding right now is the first time I've ever seen transit funding be debated so hotly on Capitol Hill. So it's difficult, and we're always hesitant to use projections and things like that because you really don't ever know what's going to happen. But, we do know if we have this kind of language to identify workers by and to identify skill groups and job families, we can start seeing patterns of where the workforce may expand, where there may be a need for skills, and where people may be aging out. So hopefully we can just combine the qualitative and the quantitative to get a better sense on the ground of what's going on.
Okay. Next question is, who is the intended audience for the manual?
The intended audience for the manual. Well, the occupational guidebook, as I said, has 176 occupations, so it's fairly big. We figure that might be a good reference tool for HR professionals or recruiting professionals, also educators, people that are in the business of either student, undergraduate education, high school education, or training programs for incumbent workers. That would be a really good reference guide just to have on your desk or something like that, to refer back to individual occupations and skill needs and educational needs and certifications. Also, someone may be at a workforce development center, a WIB or a one-stop that is specialized in counseling job seekers. It might be a good reference for them. As far as the poster, we're thinking that'll be more of a broad reach. That'll be more something you can hand out to job seekers or to students at recruiting events, or email to people, or post on your website. If you have a careers section on your website, it might be a good place for that. So we think that, the materials in general are good for job seekers as well as professionals in transit seeking to build a pipeline of workers. And, the design is kind of where we specialize it for audiences. But both can be made available electronically as PDF for anyone who cares to really dig in. So.
Okay. Next question, Nicole, is that does your effort include van pool coordinators and other mobility management jobs?
Well, actually, I had a conversation yesterday with Jennifer Cleary, my project manager, on that exact topic. Because on a few of the listservs I'm on the TDM listserv, which is how I found out about CUTR and maybe made the connection with Phil Winters to present here today. I've noticed a lot of talk about van pool and accessibility and things like that on the site. We do have a small portion of our guide. It does cover demand response transportation, and we think that we got the occupations in that guide. It seems like they're usually smaller agencies with fewer types of occupations in them, so it doesn't make up a large portion of the guide. And if there's anyone on this call that would like to review our coverage of that, I'd really welcome you to contact me, because I don't have much in the way of paratransit or demand response so far in our working groups, and I'm not getting much feedback on it, and I'm worried that maybe there's a trend in the transit workforce that we're kind of missing the boat on there. We've really been working with a lot of larger agencies, and we know a fair amount about rail, bus, and larger public transit issues. But the demand response piece, I'm not as familiar with, and I really want to make sure that we're not kind of glossing over it, because I have seen a lot of talk online about those areas, and I'm wondering if we could get some more feedback on those.
Right, and I'm sure we can, because I often hear the figure that there are 6,000 public transportation agencies in the United States, which initially sounds crazy, because most of us are familiar with about 400 of them, but there are a lot of small agencies, small urban and rural agencies that primarily do that demand responsive service you've mentioned, and so there's a lot of folks out there, but as you say, they are generally small, but we should be able to help you get some feedback there.
Right.
Another listeners indicated that they didn't see any information on engineering classifications. Can they be included in this guidebook?
I believe we may have a few individual occupations that are in engineering in the central services section of our guide. So if anyone would like to email me or talk offline about that, I can send you the information we have regarding engineering. We do have that component in the guide, but again, given from what we saw, there weren't a very large number of occupations in that area. We have, maybe one or two engineering type jobs, and, we didn't see too many occupational roles that encompass that. So anyone who'd want to review our materials on that, I'd be happy to send them to you and, make sure that we captured all the engineering-related occupations that there are. So that's a good question. Thank you.
And I might have missed this, but for everyone who's on this netcast, is there a place they can go to review your draft to this point? Is it on your website that they can review?
We do not have it published online. One of the things is that we don't have a specific website for this project. One of the issues there is just that once the grant ended, what would happen with the website? Would we have to maintain it or anything like that? So that's one of the things that is a challenge in the dissemination plan, and also at this point just getting the word out about our work. I have the files that I'm more than happy to email to people, which is why I continually provide my email contact information and things like that. And if we could maybe just kind of put that slide back up with my contact information for my presentation, that'd be helpful. So people can make sure to just email me at corren@ejb.rutgers.edu. And there's my phone. You can just call me anytime to talk about this too. I'd be more than happy to just respond or send, to the listserv. I could send out to the listserv of people on the call today the PDF of our materials. So.
Okay.
And so.
Good. To be honest, I'm struggling with understanding the nature of this next question, but I'll read it to you as it was presented, and maybe you can understand it. Can we adapt this to privatizing transit and avoid collective bargaining?
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll say that we have discussed the issue of privatizing transit. At the same time, sometimes I feel like that discussion, given the climate in the country around unions and the political climate, that can become a hot potato. The privatization aspect has actually become problematic when we're talking about the salaries, because that does change, a union bus driver and a privatized organization bus driver. We've seen some differences there, and we do want to touch upon that briefly in our guide. But for some people, we've encountered very strong feelings on that content, and we're trying to figure out how to handle it, how to address it, without kind of making it any type of a political issue. We're kind of looking at the trends. I really look forward to attending some of the events in the next few months that I'm scheduled to go to kind of get a better sense of how we should handle that content. And for whoever asked that question, I'd be more than happy if you want to email me or give me a phone call and talk about that if you have any feelings on how we handle that, just because it can then just kind of become, kind of get the project into an area that we're not really intending on going to for the sake of this. As I see it, I guess, if we're really mapping the public transportation workforce, aside from the salary issue, the jobs are still the jobs that they are. You're still performing the same job. The jobs don't change. The ownership of the agency changes, and things may change there in terms of compensation or benefits or policies, but that's not as much our focus on this work. So, anyone who has strong feelings about that or input onto how we cover that and how that might affect our guide content, I'd be more than happy to talk about that too.
Right. Thanks, Cole. And I'm not sure if it's, I think even with privatized services, you generally still have collective bargaining, particularly if you're receiving any kind of federal funds.
Right.
Although I think there are some states that don't allow public employees to bargain collectively, and consequently the transit systems have been turned over to private management, which then does allow that bargaining to take place. And I'm not sure if that was the nature of the question, but in any event, let's go to the next one. Is anything being done to get older workers back into the transit workforce? It seems like this is all geared to younger audiences. This person says they've been laid off from a transit agency as a service planner, and they have a desire to get back and stay in it.
That's a great question. There has been discussion of the older workers aspect. Macroeconomically, it's not a secret in the country that we do have a lot of older workers that are out of the workforce that have a great amount of skills and we should be, finding ways to get them back in and re-engage them. So I think that that's an important question, and that's kind of something that we should talk about when we talk about this dissemination plan. For example, we should find, agencies that are doing that kind of recruiting for older workers. I know that there are a lot of targeted populations that the transit agencies are focusing on, and HR professionals. So yeah, this is definitely not geared just to younger workers. I think some of those efforts are just driven by the fact that some agencies are fearing, down the road, the planners and the experienced managers and things like that have grown up in these organizations and have so much experience, and they're worrying now about kind of trying to sow the seeds for the next generation so that success can continue. But the older workers piece definitely is an important component, and I'll keep that in mind as we do the dissemination plan and as I talk to a lot of the HR people I'm talking to over the next few months and getting these materials out and figuring out the most effective ways to use them. So I appreciate that question.
And we appreciate the work that you and your team are doing, Nicole, because this industry, like all industries, I've done a little bit of work on this subject area, not anywhere near as much as you, but I came to discover that no matter what industry you're in, whether it's electric power companies or hospitality industries and restaurants or biotech firms or hospitals or engineering firms, they all say the same thing, that there's going to be a lot of competition for the future workforce, and how do we best position ourselves to be able to attract them to work in our field. And what you're doing is certainly helping, number one, the transit industry be able to tell its story a little bit more clearly to the workforce, no matter what age, that here's what we have to offer. And you probably had no idea that this is what we had to offer, but we do. And it's a great career, and it's a great field to be a part of. So, and it's such a difficult task that you're involved in, trying to inventory every job classification basically, and standardize them in some way so that they are understandable across the country, and then compile that and summarize it in a way that is not mind-boggling. So I'm really impressed with the work that you and your team have done, and whatever we can do to help you out, we're certainly going to do our very best to do so. So any other thoughts, Nicole, before we close off? All the questions have been submitted.
No, I really appreciate all the questions and the feedback, and I just strongly encourage anyone who has any thoughts at all or wants to continue the discussion to just call me or email me, because, I mean, it is a really big task, especially in any area of workforce development now, with the economy being the way it is. There's a lot going on, and in this project, I mean, you have so many aspects going on. You have older workers that have a variety of skills, not just people who have experience in transit, but I mean, you do have various accounting positions and management positions where we may have people with a lot of expertise that could be used in transit agencies and central services. And then you do have a lot of young people, recent college graduates. We're seeing that people graduate with a lot of student debt and a high level of education. However, they don't exactly know what they want to do, and they're not thinking about that career aspect of their lives early enough. So hopefully, these materials can show some of the younger people, how to think strategically about their education and what kind of opportunities they would want after they're done with their formal education in school. So there's a lot of different aspects of this job, and it's very, very interesting, and I look forward to talking to everyone after that. So. Thanks so much for having me on today, and thanks to everyone for the questions and for listening.
Okay. We do have one other comment that came in. Okay. Someone that said, I suggest that this project be presented to the Florida Public Transportation Association, the Professional Development Conference, to get feedback from a lot of transit professionals. That's another one of those statewide forums of transit professionals that they meet, though, in June. So I don't know if that is going to be a little bit too late for what you are doing, or would that still provide enough time for you to assemble some of the information that we might get from that forum?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have our draft materials finalized by then. I think our goal was kind of to have it up to the printer by then, but we will be working on this project throughout the fall even. So if nothing else, it might be valuable to get some perspectives on how to then use these materials, because we put so much work into them. It's equally important that we use them effectively once they're finished. So it would be good to talk to professionals about how they would like to receive these materials, how they plan to use them, and also follow-up work on what we can do to further these efforts. So. Right.
Well, we appreciate that suggestion, and we'll certainly extend an invitation to you if you find that forum could be valuable for the project.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Okay, and with that, Jennifer, I think we have some information to share in terms of our next webcast, which is going to be on February 23rd, and the subject will be transit development plans, how to develop them and why. And we'll have Ann Joslin and Bill Morris and Rob Gregg, who are all part of the research faculty here at CUTR, as our speakers for that event. So we invite you to attend that one as well. And we would also ask for those who are still with us at this point, which I think are most people, if you could take just a few minutes and fill out the survey that we conduct after each one of our netcasts. It helps us understand how we can improve anything in the future and gives us some feedback as well as to whether what we're doing is useful and meaningful to you. So if you would please, as I say, it would take just 2, 3, 4 minutes to complete this. And with that, on behalf of CUTR and all of our research faculty in the University of South Florida, we thank you very much for tuning in and for sharing your questions with us, and we look forward to having you again in future netcasts. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.